Good afternoon, good day, morning, wherever you might be. Thank you for everybody joining. My name is Ryan Chittenden. I'm with the communication team at Education Above All Foundation. We are going to be um, having a wonderful presentation today from Dr. Amir. He's the technical manager of higher education for the Al-Fakhoora Program. His career spans over 25 years of global experiences and achievements in the private, public, non-governmental, and state institutions. He has held several senior positions internationally, including advisor, dean, and director general, contributing to the advancement of higher and executive education, certification institutions, language institutes, and international education partnerships. At EAA's Al-Fakhoora program, Amir supports the efforts to transform lives through access to quality and relevant tertiary education by providing scholarships for over 10,000 marginalized and conflict-affected youth for more than 40 different nationalities in 60 top-tier universities in 10 different countries. Over to you, Dr. Amir.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Very pleased to be with you. Thank you for joining this webinar on a very important, crucial, critical subject that perhaps concerns millions and millions of people around the world when we look at how we can support them to continue to realize their dreams and within the circumstances that are quite full of upheaval in today's world. So thank you for joining in, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. To start with, I'd like to give you a brief introduction on Education Above All Foundation globally, which is actively engaged in over 60 countries, where we aim, the foundation itself aims to contribute to the human, social, and economic development, of course, of societies by supporting, providing all the provisions necessary for quality and relevant education to all. And that's how, of course, we focus on the marginalized children, youth, women, communities, and everybody who's vulnerable, as well as community, what we call conflict-affected, of course, youth. The impact that we have has spanned over 120 projects, over 60 countries, once again, 70 partners worldwide, and a large number of technical publications as well. 14.3 million out-of-school children already enrolled. You also have about 5,700 schools that have been reconstructed, and we've mobilized more than $2.5 billion, of course, for the projects. Education Above All Foundation has a number of programs. A big project, we've got Educate a Child, we've got Reach Out to All, we've got Protect Education, Insecurity, and Conflict, and we also have Innovation and Development. But we also have Al-Fakhoora at the Education Above All Foundation, which looks and oversees tertiary education scholarships. And we've got projects spanning over 10 countries, supporting more than 10,000 scholarship students with over 60 top-tier universities worldwide, with a very interesting retention rate for the scholarships of almost 90%. And what is interesting about this is that in each one of our projects, they are customized, they are tailored for the benefit of the beneficiaries, but also within their global context, their geopolitical context, but also within the objectives and outcomes that are designed as well. So all these are not just individual successes, they are stories of global change. And of course, they all with the idea, with the eye of creating an impact. Now, as we move on more deeper into the topic, I think it is important to understand what we mean by marginalized youth and communities at large. Well, we might be able to categorize them into several groups, and I tried to summarize it just to give an idea of what that means or who they might incorporate. So we've got the low income or the underserved community or populations. We've got those with socioeconomic disparities. That could be whether it's the gender, disability, perhaps geographical location, remote areas with no access perhaps to education facilities. It could be based on, of course, race, ethnicity, or even religion. And then you've got those that are impacted by disasters. And here we're speaking, of course, about humanitarian crises, whatever their scale are. And then you've got also natural catastrophes. And I'd like to stop with affected by conflict. Those are those who are forcibly displaced individuals, there are refugees and the like. And with that, I'd like to comment, because that is one of the main core, let's say, beneficiaries that we try to tackle. Now, what do these stories have in common? How do we connect all this? So imagine you've got a refugee, a person, a youth who was forcibly displaced. He had to move on from one place to another, and all of a sudden he moves from one country to another, but he has no documents. He has no legal status. He goes and travels with his backpack, no financial means, no aid. And of course, he has nobody to refer to for aid and support. You've got another case where you've got a student, a female, who was studying 1 or 2 years at university, and all of a sudden she was forced to quit or to stop simply because she no more had the opportunity to continue to fulfill her dream, or by law or by regulation, the school was closed down or bombed or let's say destroyed as well. Or she went to perhaps social circumstances that obliged her to drop out. And then you've got, of course, unfortunately, attacks on education. An attack on education is referred to as an attack either on a student or on a teacher or on a facility. And unfortunately, there is every 3 hours, there is an attack on education. As it may seem, or as it may sound, unfortunately, there are over today 50 conflicts around the world, which is the highest since World War II. And you've got more than 90 countries that are involved in those conflicts beyond their borders. So, of course, what happens is that when we've got those conflicts and those wars and that damage, we're looking at around 470 million children. That is about 1 out of 6 globally who lives in an area or a zone affected by conflict. And when that person does not have access to education or is not entitled to go to a university or school, then that has an intergenerational impact on him, on his family, on his grandsons, and so on. So, of course, that, of course, unfortunately, is quite dramatic. And even when we speak about refugees and the scale of refugees that we have, we've got about 71% of refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries. That adds to the burden economically to those already difficult countries. And only 7% of those refugees have access to higher education or tertiary education, where, of course, the target that is set by the United Nations is 15 by 30. That's 15% by, of course, 2030. So all these, of course, lead us to what do they all have in common? Well, all of these cases, of course, reflect to the fact that they are deprived of the opportunity to achieve their dreams through education opportunities. So with that being said, of course, what are the barriers then? And what can we do later on to try to overcome them so that we can provide opportunities for meaningful inclusion based on the fact that, of course, we've got circumstances, we've got conditions that, of course, deprive them from education opportunities, well, inclusive and equitable ones. This infograph perhaps is quite illustrative. It's one of the masterpieces of Al-Fakhoora expertise, where we reflect on what are those barriers. And if we start, of course, on the left side with the marginalized youth, we'll see, for example, one of them is simply a lack of education, or quality education, irrelevant studies. Schooling is one thing, quality education is another. You've got also the digital divide also, with remote areas, with different economies and societies and the level of advancement. You've got also a lot of those people who need help have stigma in seeking aid. They just, with their dignity and honor and pride, they just don't want to go and ask for help. And then when you look, for example, to the right side, you've got the forcibly displaced and conflict-affected individuals. And here we're speaking about, for example, those that don't have documentation, or they don't even have a legal status, as we saw with the refugees, or any formal proof or education proof, or even professional qualifications, or proof that they did this or that experience. And there's also the political instability, which is uncertain. And in the middle, we've got those intersecting vulnerabilities. And here, one of them, of course, is gender equality and, of course, unequal opportunities, or even unequal opportunity to have access, because simply they were not aware that there was an opportunity to be supported for their studies and education, harsh living conditions, and, of course, lack of well-being overall as well. But also, we've got the complex application process because of their background, perhaps their education system. They might even need help as they apply for further education. And then, of course, all these barriers don't just block education. Of course, they block young people from contributing to the advancement of society at large. Now, one of the most common barriers that is highlighted is, as you can see, financial burdens. And that is the core theme of our webinar today, financial burden, the financial barriers. Let's go deeper into that. So when it comes to making dreams a reality, we need to find what we call innovative financing models or solutions or alternatives in view of the current circumstance that we are all going through. So without innovative financing, all those dreams cannot come true. And here, of course, we'll give you some ideas of how that is from a global perspective. Aid in education or to education is unfortunately dwindling. It's declining. We see a lot of government support that is being reduced. We see a lot of international financial aid that is being also reduced. And we're seeing also a lot of the budgets that were allocated for education and for support for education are being allocated for other purposes and for other, of course, immediate needs. What happens, obviously, is that today we're seeing an annual finance gap of about $100 billion a year as a gap affecting the low and mid-low countries. And if that number may seem striking, well, education, yes, can be and perhaps is expensive, but unfortunately, exclusion is even costlier. Simply because, according to the UNESCO, the cost of inaction or exclusion would cost another $1.1 trillion, which could be lost annually by the government simply because of or due to what we call the school leavers, or those who drop out, or those who lack skills. And that is quite dramatic because we're going to have to pay the cost on the bill even more. So when we look at finance and when we look at the impact of innovative financing, what does it have to do with the overall tertiary education? Tertiary education simply means anything beyond high school or secondary school. Let's look at the trends from a global perspective and see how, of course, still tertiary education is out of reach of many of the world's vulnerable and marginalized. According to one study, a very, very thorough study, as you can see in terms of gross enrollment ratio, by region, the overall average of access to tertiary education globally is around 40%. And the last four groups, the Arab states, Central Asia, South and West Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, we see that the figures are even below the average, which is 40%. And that is quite alarming, which means, of course, that can also have an intergenerational impact, but also can have consequences on, of course, the quality of life and well-being. Now, what are the reasons, perhaps, for that low level or that low score? Different limitations to access, from poverty and financial reasons to crisis and emergency, high tuition fees, which we're going to tackle in a few minutes, entrance examinations. The process could be complex, could be too difficult. You've got, of course, geographical mobility and access to education facilities, discrimination, once again, in the application or even in deployment later on. And then you've got the infrastructural hinders, insufficient number of teachers, perhaps. You might want to consider the teachers themselves leaving in the industry, the profession. It's even more difficult to replace them with quality teachers, insufficient facilities, internet, electricity, and the like, low budgets, low aspirations, the morals are low, and of course, few classes are available. And of course, if that is the case, then what consequence does all of this have on tertiary education at large? Well, the current economic upheaval affects tertiary education in maybe 5 ways that we try to cover. First of all, increased financial burdens and barriers. When there is a cut in the budgets, when there is a cut in the financial aid, when there is cut in the financial resources, of course, that simply means that there are rising living costs, less enrollment, and unfortunately, that would lead to more dropouts. You might even have teachers leaving the industry and looking for other alternative sources for income, declining education quality simply because there's a lot of disturbed and insufficient funds pouring in, or there's not enough resources that are allocated and there are even delayed payments in the services. You might want to consider limited digital access learning, where we've got, of course, lack of technology, the platform, the resources, the tools, and the means to support all that. You've got also under and unemployment, which is a very important fact. a factor because of quality of education is no more relevant, then of course, obviously, companies will no more invest in the human capital of their graduates and students. And of course, you've got the social mental health concern that will even increase because these are marginalized and vulnerable youth. So they will need even more support to help them recover as they move on. So how can we perhaps try to reconsider this and try to reframe it so that we can create some opportunities and overcome the challenges? We might want to perhaps enhance financial accessibility. We might want to strengthen, of course, student services. In here, we might want to speak about social and emotional learning support. We might want to support policy advocacy for the cause itself, bringing more attention, lobbying more, and advocating more for the cause. Of course, we want to foster stakeholder engagement by encouraging more career opportunities, partnerships, and support of the students, and of course, employment opportunities, and obviously leveraging education technology so that we can decrease the gap and the digital divide. How does this work when it comes to what we call innovative financing models? Well, there are always traditional ways of financing education, tertiary education, but today more than ever before, institutions, higher education institutions need to look for creative ways to be able, obviously, to engage in innovative financing pathways. We were able at Al-Fakhoora to try to incorporate all that into an infographic and bring in some ideas that you might want to consider if you are in higher education, where we can perhaps make the dreams possible. It could be from the university itself. We're going to come to it in a few minutes, and how the university can contribute differently to higher education financing. You've got research centers, government funds and grants. You've got taxpayers paying back, but you also have the debt forgiveness. You might also, we've got the official development assistance agencies, but also the multilateral development banks, USAID, Qatar Fund for Development. You've got Australia Agency for International Development, and so on. You've got also Islamic Development Bank. You've got the Asian Development Bank. You've got the Africa Development Bank. All those are perhaps some of the channels that might want to consider, but still we don't want to rely and become over dependent on them. You might want to consider also crowdfunding and campaigns, donation campaigns, individuals who want to pay back. You've got the alumni paying back, giving back. And a very interesting note here that I'd like to highlight. A study showed that the scholarship students or students who benefited from scholarships, they developed a culture or a mindset of giving back, because for them, they felt and they knew what it meant to be supported. So when they graduate and they start their success stories and they stand on their feet and they have their cycle of poverty cut, they want to give back to show that, of course, they're willing to keep that cycle of generosity and giving as well. You've got corporate foundations more than ever before contributing to CSR, but also to education. Public-private partnerships, the P3s, is more than ever before relevant today, with corporations coming in, contributing, and trying to support education and also the communities, especially corporations supporting education institutions in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and like private banks as well, and of course foundations and endowments at large. So all these, of course, can become avenues and channels for support when it comes to providing innovative ways of financing education. Three different ways of looking at how we can cover the tuition fees. We've got what we call the full ride. And here the full ride simply means that, of course, we'll cover the tuition fees, but also the accommodation if necessary, any travel, any kind of support service and tools and accessories that they may need. We've got the full tuition, where the scholarship program would only cover the tuition fees. And of course, perhaps find another partner to cover the remaining funds or the requirements for the studies if that is part of the arrangement. And then you've got the partial tuition, which can also vary in percentage from 1% to 99% and so on. And based on that, of course, we've got the cost sharing mechanism, where we've got, for example, the matching funds. If you take, for example, a flight on Qatar Airways, you'll see that there's an advertisement by Education Above All that says, for our cause, for the cause of education, Education Above All will match whatever donation you contribute. So if you donate $100, Education Above All will match that contribution and so on. If you donate $1 million, we will also match that. So whenever you take Qatar Airways, you'll see our advertisement, remember us. You've got co-financing as well, financing the scholarship programs or the education costs, which can vary in percentages. You've got the in-kind contributions, which can be the indirect costs with the staffing, resources, facilities, offices, and the like, systems and tools and platforms. Fee for services, which can include, for example, licenses, subscriptions, and so on. That would be relevant for, of course, the student. And you've got subsidies as well. And of course, that's how the scale of contribution will also, of course, have an impact on the outcomes, the sustainable and equity of the programs or the projects that are being funded. That leads us to the advantages of innovative co-financing models. And of course, here we would diversify, obviously, the funding sources. So we mitigate also the risk later on, but we'd also reduce the financial burdens on each partner, on each party. We would benefit, of course, from the economies of scale, because based on success, of course, numbers, we can also scale it up together. More resources, better, of course, risk mitigation, foster collaboration, shared responsibility and common goals. As I do understand, sometimes it's you can do things by yourself, but it's not about doing things by yourself. It's all about partnerships, and it's about fostering collaboration, and that's where the success comes from. And of course, we would allow education to be sustainable and also, of course, impactful at a larger scale. That is how when education is structured for long-term impact, it transforms societies and not just individuals. Now, I'd like to show you a real case, a real success story of how that reflects into real practice when innovative financing creates real impact. Several years ago, we wanted to transform real cases, real success stories, where, of course, financing can go beyond the aid itself and lead to real transformation. We had a project to support a number of Afghan students who were studying in the United States. So after, of course, having them there and applying to universities, we wanted to create a partnership. We wanted to foster a relation with stakeholders so that we can create an impact for our, of course, beneficiaries. So the education, above all, through the support of the Qatar Fund for Development, we were able to secure some amount of funding, where we also went and partnered with the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, who from their side also partnered with Afghan Future Fund for some funding. So we've got the funding partners who co-finance the program. And of course, based on that, we partnered with the leading institution, Institute of International Education in the United States, IIA, which of course bridged us with the universities, higher education in the university in the United States, to place our students who are already, let's say, admitted within the criteria of eligibility as per the university. That success collaboration has led to a very significant impact, because based on our resource and study, but also our findings, just a few months ago, we did a study and it came to our attention that among the scholarship beneficiaries that were supported by us and who graduated in 2023, 91% of them were able to find employment within 6 months upon completing their studies. And the cherry on the cake is that the majority of those graduates worked in fields directly related to those scholarship disciplines. And of course, we're speaking about real fields of, let's say, of employment and of course, jobs and so on. So of course, all that reflects how when we create an ecosystem, the marginalized youth can feel that they are seen, they are valued, and most importantly, they're also connected within society at large. So we went one step further. We said, okay, so what does it mean to create a real impact when it comes to education, scholarships, and higher education? So we tried to put it into some kind of a framework where we would, bridge the quality of education, the relevance, but also the impact that it would have on the beneficiaries. And here, with generating impact, we tried to see that with this student, with this beneficiary, upon completion and upon his employment, contribute to the economic growth of his country, of his community, of society at large. And if that means, of course, if he's employed, will he be able to earn money and also spend money, which is one of the factors of contributing to any economy? Does he or she contribute to the private and non-private sectors by working and developing and innovating, contributing to the development of society, whether it's in science, whether it's in technology, whether it's in marketing, whether in business development, whether it's working in NGO? How much does he contribute to the advancement of society through, of course, engaging with those sectors? Does he or she also contribute and give back to the community? in terms of community service or community engagement at large in different ways, in different scopes. And of course, all that feeds into his self-well-being and prosperity. And that is very important because that ends the cycle of poverty, which is, of course, a very important factor when it comes to the impact. If you look at this, we'll see that when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, it is the goal number 4, education, that would feed in all the other 16 goals. None of the 16 other goals can be realized or achieved without going through education. And that is how it is the pillar of any individual advancement, but also contributes to a country's progress. And that is, of course, where we need to come in. That's where we need to support. That's where we need to create an impact and, of course, help each other. Another success story is one of our beneficiaries from our scholarship programs at Oxford University. Oxford University, we've got this student. He applies for a beautiful program at Oxford, but this is also a particular case because this student, Amir Dhia, he was born in one country, he moved on to another country, moved on to a third, and finally found himself in a fourth. So from by the age of 17, he was already in 4 different countries. And that's quite relevant because refugees or displaced, forcibly displaced individuals live in protracted areas from 5 to 17 years. And that was a very good case, which reflects on a reality. He applies, he graduates, and of course, not only does he graduate, he gets a job in one of the most leading prestigious companies in the UK. And even more interesting, he gives back to the community by, of course, doing voluntary work. And with this very simple example, we will see that we were able to achieve 9 out of the 17 SDGs by simply investing in the human capital and the person himself. And that's how, of course, by empowering youth, accelerating careers, and transforming lives, we all can create an impact. Thanks to this example and the other examples, the Education Above All Foundation, Al-Fakhoora Programme, is proud to have partnered with the Education Partners for Development as well, with over 65 top-tier universities in over 10 countries, covering more than 40 nationalities. And all these universities have all contributed to creating impact and fostering collaborations, but also looking after our beneficiaries. And we've even gone one step more by, of course, we've also gone one step further by, of course, cooperating and partnering with the United Nations agencies, which also co-fund and support our programs at large. So we believe in going together, supporting each other, contributing to each other's success. And of course, our beneficiaries are our main concern. We have an eye on them, and we have an eye for them as well. How would we connect all these scholarship students? We're speaking about 10,000, almost 11,000. One of the biggest challenges that we have is how can we connect them together? How can we create a community? How can we bring in a sense of belonging to them? I'm very pleased to refer to that the Al-Fakhoora scholarship, the Qatar Al-Fakhoora Scholarship Program by the Education Above All Foundation has a unique component called Qatar Connection. And that unique component is how we connect each other, obviously together in Qatar, to Qatar and beyond. And we do so by, of course, encouraging our beneficiaries, whether they are still within their studies or beyond their studies, and alumni with exchange programs, events and activities, internships at large, and so on. And we've partnered with a number of companies and corporations, institutions in Qatar, and to support them, to offer them all the support and all that they can have, of course, as means of not only networking, but also, of course, building some kind of mentorship support and emotional support as needed. And that's how we create value for the scholars at large. For us, quite significant, because our scholarship does not end with the financial aid. It goes beyond it by, of course, connecting them and creating that community and having them, of course, being proud that they belong to, of course, a sense of belonging at large. To conclude, obviously, we've got some key takeaways that I'd like to share with you. Education for marginalized youth is not just about education degrees, it's about inclusivity and social cohesion at large. That's where the empowerment That's where, of course, the support is all about. And without innovative financing, these dreams just simply remain out of reach. That's where we need everybody to pitch in. That's where we need everybody to think of creative alternatives to help and support those in need. Without, of course, innovative financing alone does not work as well without the human-centered engagement, where we have, of course, every program customized. We've got the interaction with the beneficiaries. We've got the support all the way from the application and the vetting, all the way, of course, to the graduation beyond that, and all the recognition that goes on with a sense of course, attainment and achievement, so that they can move on and carry with them their dreams with pride and hope. We urge governments, institutions, and funders, everyone, to go beyond aid and invest in real change. And real change, it means investing in the human capital, in people, which is, of course, the wealth. And these are the change makers. These are the people. These are the leaders of tomorrow at large. And with the stakeholders, when they work together, they all walk the talk of true global education impact. And that's where, of course, together we are all able to make a difference. We are all able to contribute to that change. We are all able to create an impact and, of course, make the world a better place for us. With this, I'm very pleased to come to the end of the presentation of today's webinar. Feel free, of course, to connect on our website, which is on the screen. You also have my email. Feel free to reach out for us for any feedback, for any comments, for any suggestions, for any willingness to support as you can, from wherever you can. Once again, Ryan, it's back to you, and I hope I was within the time.
No, you're perfect. You're actually 2 minutes early. It's really good. Thank you, everybody. We do have some questions from the audience that I'd like to get you to answer, Dr. Amir. I'm going to start with one that I'm going to answer, actually. Arij Baraket asked when the application's open for the Qatar scholarship in Qatar. That one is dependent on your university. So we have partner universities for the Qatar scholarship. Once you've registered with that university, you can work through their finance department to access our scholarship. They will provide you a link where you can register, et cetera, et cetera. So that will come in. I can't give you an exact date because every university has a slightly different period in which they do that. Typically, it's in June and July, but we will pay attention to the website, work with your university to make sure that you're aware of that. Now, Dr. Amir, I have a question from Arij Shafari, and I apologize for any of these pronunciations. I'm Canadian, and Arabic names give me all kinds of trouble. What impact does mental health have on marginalized children's learning and behavior at school?
That's a very, very important question. Thank you very much. Well, mental health is very important because when these people, these students, these youth come from different backgrounds, socioeconomic disparities or conflict, or they're affected, and when they see damage and destruction, when they see that they are marginalized, when they see that they are not given the equal opportunity, when they see that other people are advancing in society and they are not, then obviously that even increases the burden of psychological trauma. And that's where, of course, we will need to support them, because all our scholarship programs, for example, include a component where we've got the social, physio support for the students when it comes to mental health, especially when it comes to social and emotional learning as well. And it's a very important criteria factor, because if we don't deal with that as well as support, we might be neglecting a very important factor on their continuity, and that can even lead to dropouts. And that's where we step in. So mental health is very important. The well-being of people is very important, of our youth. And remember, they come from vulnerable backgrounds. They're vulnerable, marginalized youth and communities. So they're already affected. They're impacted in one way or another. And that's where, of course, we need that extra support. We need those extra resources to help them. Thank you for asking. Back to you, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. So Omara has a question. Do we have the challenges and access to finance broken down across gender, as females might face different challenges to that of males? Same goes for access to financing.
Yeah, fine. Well, of course, obviously, education should be without discrimination. And that's where, of course, for us at Al-Fakhoora, for example, we're very pleased that the ratio of gender between male and female for access to our scholarships is 48% to 52%. So that's almost 50-50. And we try to focus on that as much as we can. Globally, I don't have any figures on the table today of how many women are marginalized compared to the men. I think we would have to look at it more into what kind of fields, what countries, what communities, and of course, what are the degrees that are involved here. But overall speaking, education should not be based on discrimination. We at Education Above All, we support marginalized youth, and marginalized youth, of course, simply means that we would also give attention to, for example, women, if they are marginalized or if they're discriminated based on their gender as well. We'd have to look at it from different contexts, different perspectives, and of course, look at it from a larger perspective as well when it comes to the percentage and ratio. Next, back to
Thank
you,
you.
Ryan.
Yeah, that's great. Just for everybody that's submitting questions, there is a ton of questions both in chat and Q&A. We have a limited time, so I am trying to pick specific questions which are relevant. So I apologize if I can't make it to everybody's questions. There is a number of questions of people asking like what degrees our scholarships apply for, and if there's or they're asking in particular places. We had a couple of people that reach out in terms of wanting to partner with EAA. In those cases, I will direct you to the EAA website. Under our partner section, there's a link where you can see how you can partner with each program, depending on whether it's relevant to your particular organization. So one question we have here from an anonymous attendee: can the scholarship be extended to master's degrees, or is it just for bachelor's?
Yeah, well, of course, we do have scholarships for bachelor degrees. We've got also for master degrees. And now we're going more also into perhaps certifications and qualifications and diplomas. So we do cover all that spectrum. And of course, once again, we are in support of tertiary education. Tertiary education simply means anything beyond high school education. So yes, we do have master degree programs.
Someone asked a very relevant question just to follow up on that. Does that include like online course programs such as in Coursera or Udemy?
Yes, we do. We have one of our projects where we do have, we've partnered with Coursera, which would enable also a large number of beneficiaries within one of our projects to access to the, of course, platform, to the Coursera platform with programs that would perhaps contribute directly with impact to, of course, their employment and, of course, to their advancement in society. So yes, we also have programs online. Now, very important, as I said, it's also part of our way of supporting and reducing the digital gap when it comes to digital literacy as well, for those that need to be, of course, empowered with the tools and the means and the support when it comes to digital education. So yes, we do also support programs online as much as relevant it may be to target beneficiaries. We're very pleased, Ryan, that there are so many questions, which is also a positive sign of interest in the topic. So we want to thank you on behalf of EA, and if they can always feel free to reach out to us directly for more follow-up on this, if time does not permit. But once again, that's a very positive sign.
Well, actually, if everybody, just so everybody knows, we will be putting up the recording on YouTube, and we have everybody's email, and Zoom allows us to send everything out to attendees. So once it's up on live on YouTube, we'll send out an email to all attendees, even the people that didn't make it. They'll have access to the YouTube recording, so they can see these and see all these questions. In the description of YouTube, I'll put in some of the links that I've been sharing with people that are asking questions about where you can go on the EAA website to get more information, and how you can reach out and contact us. So we'll make sure that everything is good. Or people will be able to answer some of these questions, because I've got 13 open questions and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get them all. So one of the Burke Adams asked the question, which department should we reach out to at our universities to see if they're interested in collaborating? So um, I we work through the finance, quite often the financial aid departments of the universities that we partner with. So I would encourage um, working with your finance department, and then the university could look at reaching out to Al-Fakhoora Program, um, and then a partnership can be established. But that usually that's not a very quick process, to be perfectly transparent. So, but that would be the place to start. Would be my recommendation. Um, let's see, picking another question here. I have a couple interesting questions about AI. Dr. Amir, do you feel comfortable answering um, a couple questions in that regard? I
Give
think
me a
one's
try.
particularly interesting. It's like,
Give-
how can AI be leveraged to improve access and the quality of tertiary education for marginalized youth, especially in
yeah.
regions facing economic instability? Possibly, I would throw in uh, one of EAA's mandates in the event of conflict or
Yeah,
conflicted affected areas.
very interesting. Well, as much as internet is there to stay, AI is also there to stay. So instead of resisting, instead of going against the flow, we need to perhaps embrace AI and look at it from a constructive perspective. Doesn't mean that we should become over dependent on it. No, on the contrary, we should try to see what are the benefits of AI, how we can embrace it so that, of course, it can leverage education and, of course, support education, but also perhaps decrease the gap in the digital literacy and in digital platforms and programs. So a lot of work is being done on how that could be leveraged and uh, uh, how that could shift for the overall interest and benefit of marginalized youth and the affected communities. But once again, we have to also consider that many of those communities perhaps don't even have access to the technology or to the resources or to the platforms. And of course, or even to the devices. And that's where, of course, we would come in and try to support by providing all the resources that are possible that would make AI quite beneficial to them as a tool. And that's where, of course, a lot of support is needed. That's where partnerships can build up. And that's where, of course, innovative financing can also become quite constructive. Back to you,
Okay, Dr.
Ryan.
Mir, last question. And as a matter of fact, it's interesting that you brought up innovative financing in your last comment there. Um, uh, One of our attendees asked, what type of innovative financing I'm assuming I'm going to interject a word here, editorial on the fly here. What type of innovative financing does EAA support more compared to the overall spectrum of financing options?
Yeah, well, I said it, I think indirectly before, to the best of my knowledge, um, EAA was able to finance programs and projects and scholarships and education projects unilaterally by itself. But then it's not about doing things alone. It's not by taking the walk alone. It's more about fostering partnerships and collaboration, because these are also ways of making programs not only more sustainable, but also more impactful. So, of course, we also refer to the co-financing model where, for example, at the Al-Fakhoora level, we co-finance projects. And of course, when we co-finance projects, we would consider, of course, what others can contribute. I'll give you a very good example. In one of our projects in the United States, a number of universities, they cover the tuition fees by 100%. And others, they cover 50%. And others, they cover 25%, and so on. So there are different ways of looking at it when it comes to the cost sharing mechanisms. And of course, EAA and Al-Fakhoora in particular, we are creative in trying to find the best solution, the most sustainable, the most beneficial. And of course, if that can build up, then we would look into scalability, which of course would create a bigger, larger, and of course, a stronger impact at large. Back to you, Ryan.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mir. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've had a really good turnout. So thank you, everyone that stayed right to the end. As I mentioned before, I will post this on YouTube, and we will send out an email with everybody. A number of people have asked for copies of your slides, Dr. Amir. I don't know if you're willing to give those up. but we'll make sure that we share all the resources we can. Thank you, everybody. Take care and have a pleasant evening
Thank you very much. It's
or
been an
day.
honor. Thank you very much.